So first we have some background on Susan B. Anthony. She was a Quaker, and at age 26 she was exhilarated by life on her own. She found a local women's temperance organization, and she took her teaching job very seriously. She was fed up with not being paid enough for her time teaching, and she was fed up with men in the same position as her making twice as much. So basically she was in the teaching organization, and she was tired of the things being the way they were.
Okay, so this is basically background on like women's rights and the movement. So in 1848, Anthony moved back in with her parents to try and figure out what else she could do with her life because she was fed up with teaching. And that's when she became aware of women's rights. She met Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which was the conference's chief organizer. And basically males refused to stand the right to speak, so she planned Senator Paul's convention to argue for women's equal treatment before the law, and basically was fed up with the profession and wanted to move into like basic rights for women in all professions.
Okay, so despite the growing women's rights movement, Anthony advocated for equality for women in the classroom. Catherine Beecher didn't want women to win broad equality with men beyond the classroom, and Stanton saw teaching as mothering outside the home.
So by 1860, Anthony's efforts to organize female teachers slowed as the nation braced for the war over slavery, and it would be another half century before female teachers won equal pay. By 1873, every northern state except Indiana and Missouri had more female than male teachers, and male teachers started diminishing because the job was seen as non-college educated and low paid and for mothers. So basically teaching kind of had like a bad rap, and teachers were seen as people that weren't educated and basically like just mothers. So, yeah.
Okay. Alright, American teachers only earned about as much as weavers, so that just gives you about what teachers were looked on as in that time period. The American education system was shaped by the Prussian education system, and here's a quote from, I believe he was the president of Harvard. Yeah, president of Harvard. The world knows next to nothing about the natural mental capacities of the female sex, and that just shows you how men were just kind of trying to repress women in the same field. And then this bill, HR 1571, was a bill to do justice to the female employees of the government. This is created with the help of a former teacher, Belva Lockwood, and that just shows you how she was basically held back in the teaching profession, and so she sought to kind of reform things by moving up through like into the government. And Lockwood ended up being the first woman admitted to the Supreme Court bar in 1879.
Okay. In the African community, even greater barriers to employment outside education worked to keep more of the most talented black women and men in the classroom.
Like I was saying about teachers' pay, the women's pay was substantially lower than men's, but whenever the men found out that they were making more, they still weren't making enough to make it for to supply for their families, so they thought the job wasn't good enough for them, so they started quitting, which made it harder on the women in that time. So then they had a need for women, but women were protesting against and joining the women's rights activists to stop teaching and until they got paid more. And then they started, like they said, they started allowing more black people into the school buildings to help with the school.
Okay, so the major players were schools, they should only have